And just so you know, the session is being recorded. So what I'll do is I'll throw some edits on it after this meeting just to tighten it up, and then still figuring out where I'm exactly going to post the trainings, but I'll post it. I'll send it out to the group, and then I'll provide the material. So the file that we're looking at right now is a rent roll that we're going to walk through. It's a challenging one, so it's a good one. I'll post this file so that if you want to go back and watch the recording and follow along, you can. So with that, I think we'll just go and get into it. Whoever joins late can catch up or watch the recording. Um, so thank you for attending. It's been a long time coming. We're going to start doing these probably every other week. And I welcome any topics that you may have, anything that you have questions on that you think might benefit the group. I've been preparing a list of topics that I want to cover, but I'm happy to tailor the training however you guys need. And the structure of the training loosely is going to be focused on 30-second structured training. So like covering a specific topic, or 30 minutes, sorry. And then another 30 minutes Q&A, give or take, right? We'll be flexible with that time, but I want to always provide time to ask questions that you may have about the file, about underwriting, whatever comes to mind. Okay, so with that, we'll jump into this. So this is actually, I had three different rent rolls that I had set aside for this training. This rent roll got sent to me this week with this question. So I figured rent roll is a good place to start the training. I get a lot of questions about rent roll, which is understandable because it's probably the most difficult part about underwriting is trying to process the rent roll, trying to make sense of it. The rent roll input that I've created in the file is my attempt to try and make that a little bit easier to try and provide the data. It's amazing how many people I talk to that don't look at the rent roll, right? That are analyzing deals but don't look at it. And it's because of this format right here, right? This is really difficult to analyze. So the process we're going to walk through is trying to show you how to deal with the formatting, but also this is a big one. So this rent roll, if this is directly from the OM, it has 22 unit types in here. So as you know, the model can only handle 15. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the process of mapping the rent roll and show you how I consolidate the unit types to a manageable set that can be handled by the model. Okay. And then at any point, just feel free to jump in, ask questions. This is kind of an open training. It's not super structured or anything. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my rent roll formatter. So I need to get this rent roll into a format that we can analyze. So the format here doesn't work, right? Because you see rent is in the first line here, but down here, rent is in the last line. And I have a really difficult time in this format associating that rent amount to this unit type or this unit number. So the rent roll formatter is the tool that I created to help collapse the rent roll into a one row per unit format that we can analyze. But before I do, what I always do is I never modify the original rent roll that I received. What I'll do is I'll just copy this and I'll put it into a brand new tab in Excel. And that's where I kind of make some tweaks. So I always have the original to refer back to if something goes sideways. And then one thing I noticed on this rent roll is there are like three header rows right here, right? So in order to input this into the MFA, I need one header row followed by the data. And I tend to clean that up before I run it through the formatter. So in this case, I'm going to make row 5 my header row. And let me just zoom this up so we can see it better. So I'll just put square feet here. I just make sure that all these titles in this row make sense. So this is my market rent. So it could say whatever you want, but I just redo it. And then this is my deposit, other deposit, and then lease expiration, right? Or lease end, or whatever you want to call it. So now I have my header row. I'm just going to delete the two rows below it. We don't need those. We just need one header row, and then we want the first unit to show up underneath it. And this is some pre-work. And then the other thing that's really important about these rent rolls is this format in particular has a bunch of information at the bottom of the rent roll that is not necessarily what we want to feed into the model, right? So I'm going to go to the bottom of the rent roll here, and you can see it has the summary. We don't want that in the model. It has another summary. We don't want that. And then it has this future residents and applications. That's interesting to know, but that we don't want to feed that into the model because what that would do, it would end up duplicating these units right here because these units are already represented above, either as notice to vacate or maybe vacant. But as far as the rent roll that I want to analyze, I want to analyze what's happening right now. And so I'm just going to go here and I'm just deleting what's at the bottom. So now I have a rent roll that has the active leases for this property. And I'll just put my cursor at the very, because this rent roll is very long, it has 2,143 rows. So I'll put my cursor here and then I'm going to hold the Control Shift key on my keyboard and I'm going to hit home. And that highlights everything from that bottom corner to the top. And I'll just kind of hold the Shift key and then I down arrow until that first row is highlighted. So now I know my entire rent roll is highlighted. And that's it. And I'll just copy that and I'll paste that into the formatter right in that first cell, E1. And there we go. And so what the formatter is going to do is it's going to take all these additional rows for each unit type and it's going to create new columns for those and then move the values into the new column for each individual unit. So we just got to fill out a few things on the left here. It's a multiple row per unit. So what that means is there's a unit here and this unit has multiple rows of data. The first header row, so where all the headers are, is in row 1, so that's accurate. The first unit is in this cell. So sometimes unit, and depending on the rent roll, could be over here. It could be a couple rows down. So that's why I asked for this input. It's in E2. So I'll just go ahead and type in E2. And then the charge code. So where is the column where rent is identified? So you see right here, here's the charge code, and that's my rent. So I want these values to be moved into their own columns. So I'm going to do column K. And then where's the actual value associated with those charge codes? So right here, these are the values I want. So sometimes there's additional columns in between. So just be very careful that this is charge code or charge amount is column L. And that's it. Those are all the inputs. Click the modify rent roll. It's going to move everything over into their own columns so that we can then import it into the MFA and then we can start mapping. So there we go. So you can see it moved rent. Where's rent? Right here. So rent's its own column and then all the other additional charges and everything got moved into their own columns as well. So this is an important step and optional step, but it's one that I like to do. So in this rent roll, I noticed that there are usually I like to see 3 dates, right? I want to see a move-in date, I want to see a lease start date, and I want to see a lease expiration date or a lease end date. And so in this one, I only have a move-in date. I'll zoom in, move-in date and lease expiration date. So some rent rolls don't always have those 3 dates. And again, it is optional, but I like to have those 3 dates because it completes the dashboard and I could do kind of a further analysis in the dashboard in the MFA. So in these situations where I don't have a lease end date and a lease start date. A lease start date is my favorite date because I could see the lease renewals over a short period of time to see if the rents are trending up or down. And so since I don't have that, I'm going to just go ahead and copy the move-in date. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to insert copy cell. So I'm duplicating the move-in date and I'm just going to say lease start. And then I tend to turn it yellow just so I know I edited that column. And this isn't perfect, but what it's going to show me is at least in terms of the new leases that were signed, maybe not the renewals because they're not captured here, but the new leases, the people that moved in recently, at least in the dashboard now, I can see the move-in date and I can see what rent they're being charged to see if that is trending up or down over the last 6 months or so. And I'll show you that in the dashboard. That's kind of an important step that I like to do. Again, it's optional. It's not required to feed it into the rent roll input. Okay, so that's done. this is ready to get mapped into the rent roll input tab of the MFA. So let me bring that up. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the MFA-ADVANCED model. Any second. Everything's a little slower on Zoom. Okay, here we go. So here's the MFA-ADVANCED model. So the idea is here, I'm going to paste in my rent roll that we just formatted. I'm going to map the columns, and we're going to go through this process together. So I will click in the first cell here, and for me, I hold down the Control-Shift key. I hit the right arrow, and I hit the down arrow, and that highlights the entire range. I'll copy that. I'll go back over to here, and I'll just paste it in. So it's really important when you paste this in that the header row, let me just zoom in for us here, so that this header row aligns with this first empty row, and that the first row of data comes immediately after that. Because if there's a gap here, it's going to count that gap as a unit. So your unit count will be off. So it's very important that the data is continuous in this way. And then I'm just going to, just for sake of resources, I'm just going to close the formatter. Okay. So now we begin the process of mapping. All the instructions for mapping are kind of here down on the left. The idea is that you're going to map, and then the mapping order is right here, right? So you're going to map everything you can in the rent roll first, and then we're going to work on the unit type mapping second, with the very final step being mapping the unit number. So the unit number is the last thing you do, and you'll see it's not even available to map in here. It won't be available until you've done your work here in the unit type mapping. And the reason for that is once you map that unit number, it automatically blows into the dashboard on the next tab over. So that's kind of like that final trigger that says the data is complete, and it populates the dashboard. So I make sure that's not available until everything is mapped. So we'll just start with the unit type, square footage. So as you notice, as soon as I map one field, it's no longer available in the list. So this will help prevent mapping a field twice. And then we have resident here and we have name here. So I'm going to go ahead and I tend to gravitate towards mapping the tenant name if it's available. Sometimes there'll be an occupancy column, but I still like the tenant name because I feel like in most rent rolls, that is more descriptive with the vacancy. So I'll map tenant name, because what I found is like sometimes it'll say vacant in the tenant name, but in the resident or the occupancy column, it might say vacant, uh, or notice to vacate, or it might have more descriptive fields, which I just want the high level vacant. So I tend to map that. And then you got to make sure. So I have vacant in this column. I have down unit, and I think there's a model in this one. So I just scroll this. I want to identify all the different words that are used to identify empty units, vacant units. So there you go. There's model, right? So I highlighted all three of those, and I'll copy them. And then we need to tell the model, how are we identifying those vacant units? And that's right here. So I copied those, and I will paste special values right here. So they're already pasted in there, but now it just pasted over them. So now I have vacant down to model. So the model is going to use those three terms, and it's going to look at the rent roll, and it's going to say, wherever you see these values in tenant name, it's going to identify that as a vacant unit, and that counts towards your vacancy. And that's also important because it'll adjust the in-place rents, because typically these vacant units will have a zero or a blank, and we don't want that zero to be included in our average when we calculate the in-place rent, because it'll pull down the average. So then we'll continue mapping. We'll go market, and then keep moving over. We got move-in date. We got lease start, right? That's the field we added. We got lease end, and then our final rent amount is over here. There we go. Everything's mapped. we can see in our mapping table, everything's a yes. And now we're on to bed, bath, and unit name, which are all done in this table. And what I'll do is I'll flip back over to this because I have, so this is part of the process. Let me put this here. So most often when you look at an OM for a property, you're going to see a unit mix table somewhere in that OM. And most often that unit mix aligns exactly with unit type in the rent roll. So this is a really good example where you can see I got 76 units of whatever this unit type is. This is very hard to understand, right? But I can see I have 76 units. It's 834 square feet. And so I know based on the OM that this is a 2-1, right? So I'll put in 2 bedrooms, it's 1 bath. And I know based on the OM, so down here it's they've got designators for previously renovated, renovated, and den. I'm not going to use the den, but so this is not renovated, so I won't toggle that. And then this is a 2-1. So this is the process. I'll go through and I'll map all these unit types to actual bedrooms and bathrooms. This one's a 2-1, and then I'm going to say it's a yes, because this is a previously renovated unit, right? So we can see that here. So that's the process. I will go through and map everything. So I'm going to save you guys the kind of the boredom of mapping every single one of these because I've already mapped them, but this is the process. I will literally go through the unit type from the OM or the unit mix from the OM and I'll map them just like this. And usually very rarely will I have a unit mix that has this many unit types. This one's really long. So I'll go ahead and put that in here. And you can see once we got done mapping everything, I have 17 unique unit names. And unfortunately, the model can only handle 15. So we need to do something to be able to compress the unit types. And again, this unit name right here that's displayed, this is what it will be used in the model. And being that this isn't, sorry for the scrolling, being that this is an orange font, you have the ability to type over this with anything you want, right? You could say this is, I'm not going to type over that one. You could say this is the Abbey model, right? Whatever you want. And now that is how this unit type will be identified in the model, right? So very important to understand that. So the way you consolidate this list is by changing the unit names so there are fewer than 15 unique unit names. The easiest way to do this is by removing some of these fields, these attributes. So right now we have bedroom, bathroom, and square footage in here. Most often what I do is I will remove square footage. And now you can see I have 6 unique unit names. I have 2-1s, 2-1 renovated. I have 2-2s, 2-2 renovated, and 3-2, 3-2 renovated. That's 6 total unique unit names. But here's the thing. This rent roll is a little more complex. And I notice, right, we have a prior renovation and we have a current renovation. And just from reading the OM, I know that the prior renovation and the current renovation are not the same scope of renovation. I know that their current renovation is a little higher fit and finish, and they're asking for higher rents. So I want to be able to see that as I analyze the property. And the way I do that is identify. So these are already colored, right? All the ones that are in this color here are the previous renovation or prior renovation. So I want to identify that in the name. So there are a couple ways to do this. You can, so what I do, I like these formulas. I'm going to modify the formula. So you can see, and you don't have to understand this formula. You just look for the R right here. So it's adding the R to the formula. So all I'm going to do is just add a P to that. So now I've got this one identified as prior renovation. And now I can just copy this formula down to these cells here. And now I've got those identified as prior renovation. And then we have the normal renovation. So I only modified the cells, the formula in these cells to account for that prior renovation. So I'll go ahead and color those.
And so, but technically, you could just instead of going in the formula, you could just inject the P in
Exactly.
in the cell. Okay, if for non-technical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. It's very technical to change this formula. You can just type whatever you want in that cell. Here's the annoying thing about Excel though. It's like if you try to do 2-1 like this, if you try to type in a 2-1, it's going to convert that to a date.
Yeah.
That's Excel, right? Really annoying sometimes. So if you end up typing over this formula and you want it to just say 2-1 instead of an actual date, the way you do that is with the apostrophe. You see that? I did the apostrophe, and then you could type 2-1 and it will not auto format that cell.
Yeah.
So now it will be just 2-1. But yeah, just a little tip.
Greg, so if you don't want to modify the formula, you could just go in and just put a R, you said?
Yeah, you put whatever you want, however you want to identify these units. I tend to do my analysis by bedroom, bathroom, and typically square footage, or bedroom and bathroom, but you can literally type in anything you want, right? You type in ABC, and that unit type ABC will then now flow into the dashboard and into your underwriting model.
Got it.
Yep.
Is there a particular reason why 15 is the cap?
Yeah, it's kind of an Excel resourcing issue. 15 is the cap. It's kind of arbitrary. So I did 15 because this GPR logic tab. So the way the model works, right, is when we're doing a renovation, it's rolling those units from non-renovated to a renovation vacancy to post-renovation rent, right? So that process is pretty intensive in this model. It's this tab, it's this GPR tab, and you can see there are just a boatload of formulas in here.
Yeah.
So what I noticed is the performance of the model was being impacted. Excel was bogging down. So I limited it to 15. I found that I rarely have more than 15 unit types. I'd say maybe 5% of the time or less. So I'm usually able to work within that. But that's the reason why I did 15. And it used to be 10 and I bumped it up to 15. I bumped it up to 20. And then I noticed the model was slowing way down as a result. Okay, any other questions? Stop here for a second because I know this is the big one right here. This is how we get from 20 plus to 8. Okay. All right. So what I'll do now, so we've completed all these steps. Now we have everything bedroom, bath, and unit name are mapped. We have 15 or less, which is good. And the last step of this is to map the unit number, right? So yeah, let me just show you that real quick. So if I click this on, we have 19, right? And I could see unit number is not available to map in the rent roll. To take this off, take out square footage, and now we have unit number available. So as soon as I map unit number, this data goes into the rent roll summary dashboard. So our rent roll's mapped, we're good to go. We go into the rent roll summary. Let me zoom in for you. And there you go. You can see everything is mapped. And what it did is it consolidated all the unit numbers based on your unit type mapping, right? So all the 2-1s get consolidated, averages out the square footage, it sums the total number of units, it averages out the rent for those specific unit types. And then, okay.
Sorry, Craig, there were some unit type with different square feet.
Yes.
So, because we unflagged, no, the square feet. So the line M5 is just the average, or is the average?
It's a weighted average, right? So
okay, weighted average. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you notice here, and this is a tough example because there are a lot of 2-1s in here. There are 834, and then there are 2-1s that are 970 square feet, and there's a 2-1 that's 1,097 square feet. So what it's doing for these 2-1s, these non-renovated one, it's aggregating all that together, and it comes up with the weighted average square footage of 897.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this dashboard, so what gets updated automatically is this piece, right? So this table, but the dashboard is not updated. well, I refreshed it previously, so it looks like it's updated, but it's not updated based on our mapping. So the final step to analyze the data in the dashboard is to click this refresh data. There's a lot of pivot tables that run to feed the data into this dashboard. So it refreshes all those pivot tables so that everything is current as of your latest mapping. And I have this last refresh date so you could see when it was last done. Okay. And then, so you have a lot of indicators. So this property actually looks pretty good to me because what I can see pretty clearly is rents are going up for the most part. Like these are the time buckets, right? The last 30 days, 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90, the number of leases, new leases signed, and the average of those rents. So it looks pretty good in those time buckets. But what I like to see more often is I like to see the trend over time. And that is the reason I took move in and I added the new column for lease start. Because with that lease start, it allows me to see that trend over time down below in the dashboard, which we'll look at real quick. And then also what I'll do is I'll compare some of these indicators with what's in the OM. So I know the OM said it had 106 renovated units, so it ties out. So I'm like, oh, good. Like, I feel good. My mapping is complete. That's 38%. So that means I have, quite a few unrenovated units. And then just some high level indicators down below. So you could kind of see what the in-place rent is by unit type, and then what the loss to lease is. This is that green, and then the total rent. You can see you have the biggest loss to lease in this 2-bedroom, 2-2. There's only 4 units, so it's not that much of a weight. And that's the interesting thing is when I looked at this, the 2-1 has by far the most number of units that are not renovated. So what this tells me is like I could see they renovated a bunch of the larger 2-1. So looking at the rent roll. So with their strategy, obviously on this property is they went after the bigger unit sizes, probably because they got more of a premium on renovating those unit sizes, and they left a lot of the smaller 2-1s. So that's basically the business strategy going forward is to get those into the same state as the renovated units. But I'll look down at this. I'm like, wow, I like the unit mix. I mean, this is 87% 2 bedrooms, 13% 3 bedrooms. That's a great unit mix. Got some loss to lease that we can work on. Turnover. Usually you'll see really high turnover on the renovated units. So that speaks to this, right? And then non-renovated. Typically, on average, tenants will move on average like every 2 years or so. So that ends up being close to around a 35-40% turnover, 45. So that's pretty average. If I saw like turnover rates of like 60% on non-renovated units, that might be an operational issue, might be that rents are too high. Those are kind of flag items. On renovated units, expect to see very high turnover, right? Because they're turning units. And then this is my favorite down here. This is where I spend my time, and specifically on this lease start trend or rent trend by lease start. So this is the reason I added that column, is it helps build out this graph. And because it's not a true lease start, it's really by move-in. Like all this stuff that's out in the past are just people that moved in years ago. And the leases might have been renewed, but we don't have that data. We don't have that renewal date in the rent roll. So I don't really care too much about what's happening in the past. I really care about the last 6 to 12 months because I know those are brand new leases and I could trend the last 6 to 12 months to see which way rent is trending overall. And I'll show you some. So when you get the file in your MFA file, your file, this sheet, I protect this sheet because it's really easy to kind of like these are a lot of objects on this tab. And so if you start moving the columns and stuff, it'll all get wonky. So I protect the sheet, but it's not password protected. So right now, so you can see like it's protected. I can't click on, oh, wait, I shouldn't be able to click on this. In your file, you won't be able to click on that. But all you got to do is go to the review tab and then unprotect sheet. It's not password protected. And then you could do this thing. So if you have a rent roll that's like this, where you use move-in date for this graph, what I like to do is I will filter this graph because I really only want to see the last year of move-in dates because that is the most important to me. So what I do, unprotect the sheet, click on this chart, and then go up to this pivot chart analyze feature and insert timeline. See this? This is really cool. And then we want it to be based on the lease start because that is the field we're using in this graph, lease start. And this is really cool here. So let me move this over for you. So now I can filter this graph based on this timeline. And what I do typically is I'll change this months to years. And I just say, show me 2023. So there we go. So I could be reasonably confident that the leases I'm looking at for 2023 are brand new leases that were signed because we know this is based on move-in date. So if somebody moved in the last 12 months, chances are they're in a 1-year lease. And so I'm going to pay attention to that. And so what I do is I look at this, I'm like, oh, this is good. This is a good trend right here overall. So I'm looking at the entire property overall. We see that overall it's going up. But this is sometimes looking at the aggregate doesn't give you the detail, right? Because maybe they signed a couple 3-bedroom leases in August. That's kind of inflating the number. So what I'll do is I'll go through this filter over here and I'll look at the 2-1. So I know that the 2-1 that's unrenovated, that has the most, that has 147 units. So what's happening there? This is going to have the biggest impact on my overall rent. And look at that. That's a really promising trend right there. So we've actually gone up a couple months in a row, very notably in this last month. This is so I've been looking at tons and tons of rent rolls. Very rarely recently have I seen any rent trends that are kind of going up. So that's a good. We could look at the other unit types. So prior renovation, 54 units, also showing a bump in August, kind of flat before that. So I'll look at the renovated units. They're 13. I only have 2 months of data, so not really impactful. So nothing on the 2-2. There are no leases signed or no move-ins, which should be clear. No move-ins in 2023 on this unit type, but there are only 4 units. So I'll look at, so I basically click through all of these really quickly just to get a sense for our trend, our rents by unit type moving. So here we go. Here's a 2-2 renovated. That's a nice trend right there too. So this is all very promising. So I'm liking what I see. Really flat on the 3-2. Not a lot of leases signed, so not a lot of turnover actually in the 3-2. We have 23 units, and then this is all moving. Not seeing a lot, so that's pretty good. So those might be in high demand. There's 3-2s. You have a question?
Yes, Craig, can you add the percentage to the trend? For example, in the 2-1, because there is the trend line.
Yeah. Explain more. I'm sorry, I'm not following how. Yeah, let's talk about that 2-1. So what do you mean percent? Like the percent change?
No, the increase, the percentage of the increase that you say that it's very interesting to see the steepness, how to say.
Yeah.
How it's the trend of the
If you want to see
increase.
the percent change from here to here, the percent
Yeah.
change there. Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, let me put that on my notes.
So also, could you just say one more time how you got that lease start? I know you unprotected it, but where did you go? What did you click on to get the to get that pop up? I know I unprotected the sheet, and then you did what?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're talking about this slicer,
Yes.
right?
Yep, the slicer. Yep.
Yeah, great. I'll walk you through it. So I'll delete it. Okay, so all I did is I click on the graph.
Yep.
And so all a slicer is a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I click on the graph that I want to filter. And then, so you'll see the menu is not there at the top. So I'm looking for the pivot chart analyze. It's not there, right? But as soon as I click on the graph,
Yep.
this pivot chart analyze becomes available. And I click on that. And then there's this insert timeline. So it's a filter and it's insert timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have the option. So timelines are based on your date fields in your data. I have 3 date fields in my data. So I got to select which date field I want to filter on. I know that this graph, it says right here, it's by lease start. So I want to add the lease start. And then that's it.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
it gives me this. And then you can select each of these months. You can click and drag, right? Like this, you can click and drag. I find it's more tedious to deal with the months. So I will toggle this month filter to years. And then I would just click on 23. So now this graph will always be filtered for all the months in 2023.
Gotcha.
Now, as we get into next year, I might filter by months. So I can have 2022, 2023, but you have the option to pick your level of filtering. Does that make sense?
It does. It's perfect. Yeah, I added it. I'm going to probably keep it as a permanent fixture.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about trying to figure out how to add. So it's not perfect because this only applies to this graph. This graph uses a different field, different date field. So I can't create one timeline to filter all these time-based graphs. So it would get really confusing if I had 3 of these timelines down here to filter. So that's why I'm kind of showing it to you as a one-off because I would love to be able to filter all of these by the same timeline, but they're using different date fields, and that makes it difficult.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you can absolutely like in your MFA come in here, add it, and then just leave it, right? Be very easy to do that.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So just to wrap up on this, so let's say I'm happy. I'm happy with this level of detail, right? I'm okay. I want to start my underwriting. I want to do it at this level of detail for the unit mix, my renovation strategy. It's just as simple as clicking this populate unit mix. And all that does is it takes this data right here that I have highlighted. It takes that and it just puts it into your underwriting, right? So I will go ahead and do that. But yeah, it gives you a warning. So if your underwriting model, if you've already kind of done some unit mix analysis in your model and you do this, you click this button, it's going to erase whatever you have in that table, that unit mix. So it's just a warning. It's
Do
really
you have to
slow.
highlight the headers as well?
No, you don't have to highlight anything.
Okay.
So I was just highlighting for demonstration to show you what's going to, you don't highlight anything. You just click the button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. So there you go. It's all in there. So this is exactly what was in this tab, right? Rent roll summary. One condition though, when I bring the data over from this table, it's kind of hard to identify what units renovated. So I'm only looking for the unit types with R at the end to toggle it as renovated here. So in this situation, I know that, hey, this is a renovated unit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put yes for those. And the reason I do that, it really doesn't impact your underwriting at all. But if you go and you start doing the rent comp tab, the rent comp tab also looks to identify, see which ones are renovated and which ones are not. And that's how it plots the different colors on the graph. So just to show you real quick, oh, these are all 2 bedrooms. Yeah, so there you go. So it plots the green ones. These are previously renovated, and then these are not renovated. So it uses that yes, no toggle to do that. But otherwise, this does not affect your underwriting down below or anything. And then I wanted to show you guys a really quick thing that I do but because underwriting is kind of like peeling the onion, right? I'm trying to spend as little time on it as I can to get to a no, so I don't waste a bunch of time, like 6 hours underwriting a deal, right? So I have all these little tricks that I do to just kind of, so I do the quick underwriting. That looks good. I'll import the T12, the rent roll, and then I go to this level of detail, but I do a very quick first pass. I don't spend a lot of time on my renovation plan initially. And the way I do that is for the units to renovate. So So let's say in this case, we're going to renovate 100% of the classic units, right? Very easy. So all I do is I know the classic units are the ones without the yes. I just say, I put in a formula. I just say equals those units, right? And then I'll copy that formula down to this cell and this cell. So these are my unrenovated, and I'll just do a paste special formulas. So now I have my renovated units. Oh, copy the formats too. Doesn't matter. And then cost per unit. This is kind of an interesting one. So I have noticed in a lot of my underwriting, and this isn't perfect, but it's better than putting like $8,000 per door per unit type, right? So I've seen that a lot. Like people would just say, well, I know it's going to be roughly 8,000. Let's do that. But what I'll tend to do is I'll say, hey, let's assume, we've been seeing renovations go for $12 a square foot. So I'll put in 12 up here. This is just a really quick thing. I'll do a formula that says equals square footage times this $12. And then I need to make sure there's absolute referencing so I can copy this formula. And what that means is that this P25 needs to have the dollar sign before the P and the 25. The easy way to do that is right after I click on that cell, you see it's still highlighted. I just hit the F4 key on my keyboard and it puts the dollar signs in for me. So there's my formula. And then all I got to do is just paste that formula down. So paste special formulas. And now I know that all these are about $12 a square foot. And then, yeah. So in some of these, you can look very easily. This one's a little harder because the square footage is different between the two ones because we aggregate or consolidated. And so, but typically, if you have a clean rent roll and you have like a classic unit and a renovated unit, and you're comfortable with those renovated rents, the easiest thing I do is I typically say, okay, the rent premium is going to be this renovated unit minus the classic unit. That's my rent premium because I'm comfortable with the renovated units. It makes it very easy to say, okay, see, it doesn't work well in this example because again, we're consolidated, but and then go 175 just for fun. So then I've got a very quick and dirty renovation plan, but it's more accurate than just kind of peanut buttering across all the unit types. That way I could see, well, are we getting ROI? What do we need to get to ROI? And then when you go to your rent comps, you can really, really dial in this premium. But I'll just put high level on. Sometimes maybe I'll use the broker's input as a guideline, right? I don't always take it at face value, but if they're saying we could get 150 premium on the 2-1, maybe that's what I'll start with and then just kind of tweak. But I spend my first pass on this, I'll spend like 30 seconds. And then I get through my pro forma and then I see if it's close and then if it's still looking good and then I'll come back. But in my underwriting process, I probably spend the most amount of time on this, right? Your gross potential rent is by far the biggest number in your underwriting, has the biggest impact on your return. So it's really important to understand your rents and understand your renovation strategy. So that's like if I fully underwrite a deal, I'm spending a disproportionate amount of time trying to get these things accurate. Okay, so I will go ahead and stop there because that's what I wanted to cover today. So it's the rent roll mapping and import. And I will open it up for questions over what we just reviewed, or if you have any other quick questions about the model. Oh, and one thing that I wanted to highlight before we start that is the model I'm in right now is I'm working on some enhancements right now. And I think this one's really cool because I do like the summary tab, right? I'm very proud of that, but it's a lot. It's a lot of information. And I find when I present the summary tab to like Rod, um, he goes haywire. It's just a lot of information. So I've been working on creating a very concise summary that's super easy to share that requires no work from you guys, right? So it's this button, copy deal summary. So it copies an image of the deal summary from your underwriting to the clipboard. And the scrolling is crazy. It's just an image and I'll paste it here. And so here's the deal summary. And these are essentially all the questions that Rod asks, right? So I'm just kind of selfishly, I'm creating this, but I think it's beneficial. Just real high level deal information, whisper, offer, exit price. What is your renovation strategy? Like your CapEx costs, your debt structure. If you're doing a supplemental or a refinance, what is the deal structure? And then what are the returns, right? Just walks you right through. And then what do you have to raise to close this deal? So hopefully I'm going to push this out. I'm kind of making some tweaks. So this is also part of a new tab that I'm working on, which is kind of like a deal review checklist. I won't go through it here, but it's just like check all these items. So we're working through this on CRE. Is like we're going to this tab now and we're checking all these items, make sure we've covered every single thing that needs to be covered before we submit an LOI. Because sometimes it's easy to forget one thing or another. I'm finalizing this and then I'll push out a new version to you guys that'll have all this and you can use it. And again, like everything in this underwriting model, it's all optional, right? The only thing that's required is this tab, the underwriting model. Okay, that's all I have to say, and I'll open it up to whatever you guys want to talk about.
First of all, thanks. I think it was awesome. Thanks for walking us through it. Very, very valuable. I had a question. So a lot of the deals I'm looking at, or a lot of the things that I get sent, OM package is PDF. And so like to get rent rolls out of a PDF is a nightmare. And so I didn't know if there's, a secret on how to export it or convert it. I mean, the converting of a PDF to an Excel spreadsheet, there's consolidated cells. It's all formatted. It's banged up. It's a mess. And I've gone back to the broker and asked for Excel spreadsheets, and they look at me like I have, like I'm an alien, right? They're like, what?
Yeah, I have a big problem with the PDF too. Like there's probably like 3 or 4 online PDF converters that I try,
Yeah.
and none of them are great, right? And a lot of them, if I really want to get it into the right format, it requires sometimes like an hour or more of going
Yeah.
through and fixing it all. And it's just such, and here's the thing, if they are using a property management software, it's no effort at all to export to CSV. It's in all the software. I don't know why they do the export to PDF. It feels passive aggressive to me.
Yeah.
Like, you guys know we want Excel. Why are you giving me PDF?
Yeah.
Yeah. So always my first course of action is I go back to the broker and I said, hey, I like the deal, but I need the Excel files. And you're right. Sometimes the brokers don't don't do it, right? And you're just kind of stuck at that point. It's huge, but it's not hard. Like almost every property management software I've seen has the option for CSV, and it's no effort. So I don't understand the PDF thing. So yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to share the links that I use for PDF conversions. I found Adobe has one, and I found I have better luck with Adobe's. There's a free PDF to Excel.com. That one's okay, but I think Adobe's is a little bit better. And I was playing with ChatGPT too, because you have the option now to feed ChatGPT PDFs, and they have these add-ons that can read PDF. And I was trying to use ChatGPT to convert, and it was equally bad.
Can you open with Word as a Word file and then copy the table in the Excel?
You're going to have a lot of the same problems. Yeah, it's because the PDFs, it sees like those really wide rows of merged cells. And yeah, I mean, if you find a good process, I mean, please share with the community because this is like a huge pain in the neck.
We try.
Yeah, yeah. If you find anything, let us know. All right. Any other questions I can help you with?
I just want to say thank you. This is extremely helpful. And so I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
For sure. Yeah, let's keep them rolling. And if you guys are in the file and if you have any questions or topics that you want to cover, and it could be anything at all, right? From underwriting to file usage to usability, whatever you want to talk about.
So
Please let me.
I think so. Like what you did, this is the block and tackling of rent roll, right? But I
Yeah.
think you kind of you touched a little bit on it toward the end when you were looking at the graph and the rent by year and the trend lines. Maybe a conversation around, you know, like your expert opinion, like, hey, how do you read it? Like, what's the nuance? My experience says, hey, I see this trend doing this. This tells me that maybe possibly this. Maybe a little session of, you know, we have the meat and potatoes. We have it done. We got it where we want it. How do I really analyze and look for red flags or green flags? You know?
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of a deal. This I spent a lot of time on my initial review in the rent roll because I think it gives you the most accurate view of the performance of the property that's happening today, right? Because T12 is a little bit lagging. Um, but like I'll tell you, I spend a lot of time looking at this table right here because I'll read the OM. A lot of the times OM's like, oh, they're receiving $150 premiums on lease trade outs. And I'm like, well, you know, if this trend, so this is a good rent roll. Like most of them don't look like this. So I've included some formatting and I think it's in the new model. So it'll get pushed out to you guys. But what's going to happen, can't remember if it's in the last model or this one, but it'll turn red, right? If it's lower than the previous year or previous time period or the 60 to 90 period, it's going to turn red. And that's been really helpful for me in having the conversations with brokers because I could go say, hey, well, on your 2-2, you've signed 6 leases in the last 30 days that are on average $150 lower, right, than the last 30 to 60. So these are the things I look for, and those are the red flags right now. We're seeing a lot of that, right? We're seeing a lot of the rent trends dropping, and the brokers love to use the metric of like, oh, you know, rents are up, you know, X amount of percent since 2020, right? Or 2021. I'm like, of course, we had a huge run up, but that doesn't explain what's happening right now. So I really drill in on these trade outs here. And especially like this lease, this rent roll is not the best, but especially if you have the lease start date, that's where this gets really good, right? Because you know based on the lease start date what the average lease rent is for these time periods. I spend a lot of time on that. That's probably where I spend most of my time on these buckets. And then this graph that we've covered, right? Just to see where are things trending. And sometimes uh the broker, sometimes they get a little defensive, right? So sometimes I'll just say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Like help me understand where we're disconnected, right? Because you're saying you're have seen all this great stuff and not seeing it. So
Is
we
is
can
the 1274 in that first column where it says 1274 divided by 9, is that um an average of the rents, or is that the highest rent achieved at 9 of those, or what is that?
good question. Yeah, you'll see I have these numbers here, but it's there's been 9 leases signed in the last 30 days for an average rent of 1274.
Okay, perfect.
Question. Yeah, and then I have the min max out here.
Okay, so there was one signed for 853, or is that min max for also encompass the 60 days and the 90 days?
It's across the entire period. So it's looking at all 147 units and is pulling out the minimum and the maximum across all 147, regardless of time period.
In that floor plan.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
And is it accounting for the vacancies and that min max? Is it doing that average?
It's pulling out vacancy.
It's pulling out vacancy. Got it.
So yeah, all these numbers exclude the vacancies because I don't want to include the zeros in my average because it pulls it down.
Yep.
So I have a question. So some rent rolls don't have like lease end dates or lease start dates. So you always recommend to have that in there. If they don't have a lease end date or if they're month to month, how do you work around that on the month to months?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just had one of these. So what I did is I just used the lease start date plus 365. Oh, no. So lease end date. No, I used shoot, I'm trying to remember. So I look at so many deals a week. I can't remember which deal it, but yeah, so I did an if statement. So I kind of I said, if the lease, so if it's month to month, right? So it was identified, it had its own column for month to month, and then it had a lease end date of like the next month. So I just used that and I concatenated the lease end date plus the month to month date.
So for the month to month, so for like you would put in like October 1st was the start date and October 31st is the end date.
Yeah, and I think it already had the October 31st, but the problem is they split out like the lease end date for all the normal leases, and then the month to month leases were separate columns. So I had to concatenate in that one. But a lot of them, like I think we have month to month in this one. I'm pretty sure we do.
Yeah, because some of them just leave the lease end open if it's month to month.
Yeah, if it's open, then I would probably put in a date. It's not, yeah, hopefully there's not a lot of them month to month, but yeah, some of them will require, it's just, you could do that. You could put in like a formula that's like equal today plus 1 month, essentially. Yeah, and all this, just so you know, like all the dates and all this stuff, it's all totally optional. It does help, right? So it feeds the dashboard. It helps me understand what's happening in the rent roll. I have had several rent rolls that are just so bad that I can't do that. And so if we didn't have dates in here, right, I'm just going to take out these dates. So we don't have that information, right? So what's that going to do to them? So I'm going to refresh the data, and you see all these go zero, right? I don't have any graphs. They all go zero. Like it loses all the information, but I still have enough information for my underwriting model, right? So the whole purpose of the rent roll is twofold actually. So one is to give me some analysis, right? If it has all the fields that I need, I can then kind of do all the analysis. But ultimately, I just don't like entering in this data by hand and trying to aggregate and trying to do all the calculations. So even if the rent roll is very incomplete, doesn't have any dates, as long as it has, like, let me go back over here. As long as it has these fields in red, you see this? The fields in red are really the fields that are required to put it into my underwriting model. So if I can't do the analysis, if it doesn't have the dates, I'll still map the fields in red, and then it'll populate this automatically, and then I just push it into my underwriting model. Does that help? Sorry, long-winded answer.
Yeah, it does definitely. Yeah, because on the month to month, sometimes if they don't have end dates, then the graphs start to look a little
Yeah,
funky.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's a yeah. Maybe there's a better way to kind of present the information, right? If you're missing those data elements, right? How do I present that? But yeah,
But
I get that question quite a bit because if they don't have the data and then the graphs look like this, right? Like, well, how do you interpret that? Well, if you don't have the date, the graphs are not going to be very useful.
got it. Yeah, this is helpful.
Okay. Good question. Yeah, this is good. I love hearing the feedback, the questions that you guys present because it helps me kind of figure out how I prioritize my time evolving the model, right? Because I kind of am a little bit selfish. If I don't get a lot of feedback, I'm going to work on the things that I think I like, but I also want to service you guys. So if you have ideas, I'm all ears.
I mean, would it be feasible or a good idea to have a check mark as month to month, so that we can track it in the rent roll summary or in rent roll inputs?
Yeah, that's a good point. So what my experience is like month to month is handled pretty differently in a lot of different rent rolls. I have a hard time standardizing month to month. And then the other thing I struggle with is a lot of time the month to month fees will show up in other income. So in the T12 other income. So I don't want to double count, right? I want to make sure, but we can probably figure out a way to identify month to month. Like, okay, so if you have 147 units here, you probably identify how many of them are month to month and what the average month to month fee is. That could be helpful. Would that be, is that kind of what you're talking about? Or
Yeah, I think yeah, I think you could kind of like how you have in the T12s or in the rent roll, you have like a warning. Hey, make sure on the other income on the T12, it's not double allocated or I don't know, you can do a keyword search, but I know sometimes the words are not always, it's not labeled the same. So, but yeah, I think that would probably address it.
I think that's one thing I've struggled with rent rolls, right? So this is no example, a good example as well, is the all the additional fees. Like these are important to pay attention to, right? So I do refer to these, but it's usually through my underwriting process as I'm like evaluating, because most of these fees they show up in the T12, right? And so what I do is I'm when I analyze the T12, I'll come back to the rent roll to see, okay, well, what are they charging for the trash, right? Or what are they charging for pest on average? If there's a washer and dryer fee, I'll verify the T12 with the rent roll because I always think the rent roll is the most accurate, right? It's the most up to date. But I've struggled a lot with trying to standardize a lot of these rent roll additional fees because some rent rolls don't have them listed, and sometimes they don't really align very well with the T12, what you see in the T12. So it's very much an ad hoc analysis. But I think month to month has come up a couple of times. I think it's definitely something worth looking at. I mean, it's a big fee, $300 in this example.
Well, I think
It's
not just the fee aspect, the income, but also just the stabilization of the property.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you know.
Yeah, I'm typing this down. Okay, great. Yeah, good feedback. Okay. Any other questions? Feedback? Anything?
No, it's possible to, no, sorry, as Trevor asked in the chat, will be possible to have a walk through a deal from the start until the end. I know that I already asked you like a video in YouTube that I really like.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. Yeah. I'll put that on the list. Yeah, that's a tall order, right? If we do it from start to end, it could take quite a lot of time. But yeah, let me work on that. I've definitely gotten this request a couple of times, and I've been trying to get to the point of recording a video, but even like so the videos take me a long time, unfortunately, to record and to prepare for and to edit and do all that stuff. So, but that's something, and this would be a great forum to do that. So let
Thank
me
you,
add
Craig.
that to my list. Deal front to end. Cool.
Well, I think you're kind of doing it, right? I mean, like, yeah, if we had these 1 hour sessions and then we just kind of go through each one and the nuances of it, and then we have after we've gone through the blocking and tackling, then we go through the analysis of how we analyze each piece. That in itself, it builds itself, right? And so then you can just kind of pull it all together.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges with trying to pull together those, it just like this recording will be over an hour, right? And so just getting through all those recordings versus just all in one shot. I can see like it's on my list for sure. It's and I think it would be really helpful to have that video with the chapters, right? Saying, okay, this is the rent roll input, this is the T12, it'll take a little time to put that together.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's awesome. Really very helpful for when you have little time. This tool, it's incredible. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep. Always looking to make it better. So always give your feedback. I appreciate it. Good or bad, right? So, okay. Last chance. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap. Okay. So I'll pull down the video from Zoom, make some edits, and then I'll figure out where to post it. I'm not sure if it's going to go on YouTube, but I'll send you guys all an email with the video with a link to the rent roll that we did in the example.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you guys have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Craig.
Bye.
Bye-bye.